Good evening and welcome. We are pleased to present this evening's program, Navigating Your Next Move During Challenging Times. To begin our program, please welcome our moderator, Suffolk University alumnus and member of the College of Arts and Sciences Alumni Association Board, Marc Marotta.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our virtual alumni panel, Navigating Your Next Move During Challenging Times. My name is Marc Marotta. I'm a 2011 graduate of Suffolk, and I'm currently a private wealth advisor at Merrill Lynch here in Boston. I also currently serve on the College of Arts and Sciences Alumni Board. This event has been organized by both our board as well as the SBS Alumni Association Board, Graduates of the Last Decade Council, and Suffolk's Alumni Relations team. We have over 100 alumni attending tonight's event, which just goes to show we are truly navigating these challenging times together. Before we get started, I do want to just take a moment and congratulate all of the graduating seniors who are attending the panel this evening. I really hope you take some time to reflect on your college years and take pride in all that you've accomplished thus far. On behalf of the entire Alumni Association, congratulations. During the panel this evening, you're going to hear from 3 Suffolk alumni who graduated during the 2008-2009 financial crisis. They're going to each share their experience as well as advice about how they transitioned to life after college during a tough economy. We're also going to hear from Joanna Lazarick. She's the Associate Director in Suffolk Center for Career Development. Joanna is going to share career resources available through Suffolk. And if you have any questions for our panelists or Joanna, please enter them in the chat feature throughout our discussion. I'm going to start by having each panelist introduce themselves and tell us about their professional journey since graduating. I'm going to start off with Hind Habbach tonight. Hind, the floor is yours.
Hi, thanks, Marc. My name is Hind Habbach, and I graduated from the College of Arts and Sciences, class of 2009. And I double majored in government and English. Track was international relations, and I grew up in Revere in East Boston originally. But I found myself just 2 months after graduating in the tri-state area because my family relocated to the northern New Jersey area. And the idea was to go straight to law school, but I had to put that idea on hold because after all the years of connecting, working on Beacon Hill at a law firm where I was placed by Suffolk's Career Services, actually growing a network there that couldn't be leveraged, I found myself in a new state where I had to learn to make new connections. So just a couple of months after graduating, I went through a recruiter at the time who asked me what's important to you at finding a job. And I told him that I really wanted to get something in the international relations field, but if I couldn't do that, I said I wanted to work for a global company. And soon thereafter, I was approached by a global real estate firm that was really trying to expand their global footprint in Manhattan. So they saw my resume, and I saw that I had an internship in Dubai, which was a market that they were trying to approach at the time and pursue. They saw that I interned, that I did a study abroad program in Madrid, and they had just recently opened an office in Europe and established their first European office. But I think most importantly was my involvement in Suffolk University's diversity clubs. And I was really involved in Black Student Union, Cape Verdean Student Association, and the Caribbean Student Network, and that was what sealed the deal.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Hind. Steve Douillette, I'm going to turn it over to you next.
Sure. Thank you, Marc, and good evening, everyone. So I was a 2008 Information Systems and Operations major in the business school. And while I was at Suffolk, I had a number of jobs and internships in a few different industries to gain some experience. But I'd also started a consulting company on the side, providing IT support for local small businesses here in the Boston area. Now, in the fall of 2007, which was during my senior year, right at the start of the financial crisis, I was at a job fair and ran into an insurance company that was hiring. I went through the interview process, and they offered a position to me after graduation starting in June of 2008, which was right at the peak. So at that point, with an offer in hand, I had a decision to make: build up my IT support company or take this full-time job with benefits in a very stable industry. I chose the latter because of the unsure state of the economy. I still did my company as a side hustle, but that's where my career started, is at a very large insurance company. I eventually became a manager with my own team. I stayed for 6 years. And most recently have shifted to management consulting, where I've worked for another 6 years. So mostly large company experience, but certainly have dabbled in running my own business as well.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Last but not least, I'm going to turn it over to our third panelist here tonight, Gabriella Priest. Gabriella, you want to share your story and your experience in terms of graduating into a crisis?
Sure, Mark, and thank you, and thanks for everyone for joining us this evening. It is quite a crowd. We can't see your faces, but we are very excited that you are here, and hopefully you learn a lot from tonight. So I originally graduated with my Bachelor of Science with a sociology major and a crime and justice focus in 2006. And I decided to stay at Suffolk and to get my master's, partially because I really wanted to hone my skills. And I really appreciated the knowledge that I had gained from Suffolk Sociology Department. So I stayed at Suffolk and I worked on my master's in criminal justice. And I worked a full-time job that was not in my field. I actually worked at the Career Development Center at Suffolk. So higher education wasn't something I wanted to do long-term, but it was a full-time job that helped me with grad school. And it helped me gain a lot of skills too that I was able to transfer to future jobs. And so I made the decision, to work a job that was entry level, not in my field, but it was helping me achieve my graduate school goals. And so I graduated grad school in 2009. It was definitely a very difficult time. I actually referred back tonight to my job search folder that I was able to dig up from back then. And I kept a spreadsheet of employers that I was interested in and industries and jobs that I was interested in, because really it was about a 6-month job process for me. And so I had a spreadsheet. I found it today. I had 56 employers on there. So as I kind of heard of things that I was interested in, I kept track of them. I applied to 36 jobs. I got interviewed for 5 and made it into kind of a final offer stage for 3 positions, which all happened at the same time after 6 months of job searching. So you kind of never know, and it just shows that you need to keep putting yourself out there. And I, was really trying to make a decision between 3 different jobs. 2 of them were much higher pay, but were a set time frame. At the time, similar to now, there were stimulus funds that were going on because of the recession. And 2 of the jobs were only able to guarantee a position for a year because of that stimulus funding. And they were pretty good pay, but, I didn't really see a lot of growth. And again, there was the possibility they would end in a year. So the job that I ended up accepting the offer for and taking was much lower pay, but I was able to see a great potential for growth. And 10 and a half years later, I am still at the same agency. I've had 4 promotions. I'm in my 5th position now. And looking back, I'm really glad that I made the decision that I did. But it took a while to get where I did. It took a lot of persistence and a lot of time. But I'm happy that I learned, a lot of skills in my entry-level unrelated position, while I was engaged in that job search.
That's great. Yeah, I think that the key takeaway there is, across all 3 of you in the stories that I heard was that perseverance is key, right? Don't get discouraged. Continue to put your best foot forward and keep putting your name out there. And 53 people or 53 companies, I should say, Gabrielle, on a spreadsheet and 36 applications. That is a lot. So I think perseverance, again, is key there. So to that note, Hind, I'm going to come back to you. You spoke a little bit about your involvement on campus and your study abroad experience and how studying abroad in Madrid and, again, the campus experience here in Boston, how that helped you land your first job. In a challenging job market, can you talk a little bit about how soft skills can help applicants really stand out against the crowd? And also, can you talk a little bit about how they can market those skills to potential employers?
Absolutely. So you say soft skills, power skills. I like that phrase. So although at the time the chairman and the president didn't interview at the firm, they did review certain resumes that they deemed to be essential to the future of the company. And one of the resumes were mine, actually. I didn't know at the time, but both of them happened to be highly engaged, not only in higher education, but also in the international relations industry in the realm. So they weren't looking for someone with a real estate background, so to speak, and the unicorn, I would say, that the person writing the job description was after. They were looking for those power skills that we're talking about right now. So those were the extracurricular activities I demonstrated, the leadership, the community involvement, the strong commitment to cultural sensitivities. So you may ask yourself, do I have soft skills? The answer is yes. So out there, yes, you all have soft skills. We all have soft skills. So put them down on your resumes. Tell your future employer, you know how to negotiate. You do it all the time. Paper extensions, that's negotiation skills, really. You present in front of audiences all the time. That's your peers, your classroom. You're a top public speaker, Hanover Street, you're public speaking on the Commons, you're doing all of that. Teamwork, collaboration, you're doing all of that. Rams, we have soft skills. We're the top soft skill possessors. My favorite power skill of all time is persuasion. You are persuading that employer before you walk out the door that you have all the soft skills and power skills that employer and that organization needs. So absolutely, they knew I had them, and you know you have them, so put them down.
Yeah, that's critical, Hind. I think a lot of times people don't think of, how a philosophy class, a good friend of ours and also on the CAS alumni board, Tom Busby, is a philosophy major, and he's now in private equity and venture capital, and you wonder how the two can connect to one another. And I think you hit the nail on the head, right? It's the persuasion, it's the language skills, it's the presentation skills, it's abilities that might not necessarily show up on paper when someone looks at your degree, but the ability to communicate how your degree can translate into skill sets that the employer you're in front of needs for their company, and selling yourself, right, is exactly what you just hit on there. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Steve, one of the things we spoke about in the past is networking, and you mentioned networking and marketing yourself was really essential to kind of landing your first job and going to the career fair and kind of getting your name out there. Can you offer any insight as to how people should be networking and trying to find ways to stand out in kind of this virtual job market, if you would?
Sure, Mark. So, I recently heard that one of the largest trade shows in the world, it's called the Canton Fair. It happens in China, I think twice a year. It's coming up in the summertime, and instead of holding it in person, they actually decided to hold it virtually this year. So that's 200,000 attendees that are now going to be talking to companies about potentially buying goods from China and doing it entirely online. Something they've never done before. And, it's an impressive feat, absolutely. But it really goes to show that anything you would normally do in person, just like yourselves getting together with family and friends over a Zoom like this or FaceTime, just find a way to do it online. The things that you would normally do that the Career Development Center recommends, finding alumni on LinkedIn, networking through friends and family, just reach out to them and ask for a video chat conversation. Normally grabbing coffee with something would be pretty casual. Do the same thing online. Even just bring a mug and make it a novelty to grab coffee with them. But for more specific advice, I would recommend to clean up your online presence. You aren't going to have the opportunity to meet everyone in person probably no one in person over the next few weeks and months. So make sure that your LinkedIn profile has a really nice picture on it. Make sure that your experience is up to date. Because recruiters and anyone else who looks you up online will only have your online presence to be able to reference. If you are looking for a job or an internship or any other kind of work, don't hold yourself to just your local area. So COVID-19 has taught many business leaders that location doesn't really matter when looking for good talent. So even if you aren't in a different time zone, people work different time zones all the time. I've gotten up for plenty of calls with Europe over my years. People do it on a regular basis every single day. And in reality, companies that are hiring are focused on two things right now. Yes, their hiring either may be on hold or might be slowed down. But their two main purposes are A, preserving revenue that they already have on the top line, and then minimizing their existing costs on the bottom line. And finding ways to pitch yourself as adding value in either of these areas will definitely make you stand out.
That's excellent. Yeah, I think one of the things that you hit there too, I think is great is you talk about LinkedIn, right, and holding yourself out in a professional light. I think one of the best things that Suffolk offers is we have a very supportive alumni base, right? I think that I certainly have gotten contacted by current students, former students, just asking to connect on LinkedIn, looking to pick my brain and just talk about almost like an informational interview. And I think that nowadays it's perfect in terms of being productive and trying to stay in front of people. And it's not necessarily asking fellow alumni for a job. It's what you just said, Steve. It's networking, and it's just asking people for, an opportunity to learn more about them, right? Because again, you never know who you're connecting with, fellow Suffolk alumni, particularly right now on LinkedIn, and that kind of virtual networking is incredibly powerful. And I, for one, I can't speak for everybody, but I like to think I can. I, for one, when I get a LinkedIn request from a Suffolk student, I immediately look to accept that and look for this way I can help that individual. So I think that that's great. And particularly too, like Steve, like you said, that the geography is quickly becoming boundless, right? I mean, there's opportunities now, not just in the greater Boston area, but, you know, across the country, across the world. It doesn't need to necessarily just be local to where we are. I'm going to transition back to Gabriella for a moment. Thank you so much again for sharing your story earlier. I found it really noteworthy when you kind of talked about how you were employed in an entry-level job that wasn't essentially related to kind of what your career goal was at the time. And I think a lot of job seekers today are going to have to take positions that aren't directly linked to kind of what their overall career aspirations are in this kind of current climate. What advice would you give to someone that's in that position? And additionally, you know, how do you effectively job search at the same time as keeping your current employer happy, right? That can be a challenging task.
Yeah, one thing I'd say is definitely looking at the potential, you know, looking at what you can learn from a job that might not be related, looking at starting as an intern maybe, you know, swallow your pride. Don't think, oh, I have a degree or even maybe a graduate degree. You know, think about where you have the potential to go. I've hired a lot of actually postgraduate students for internships that have interned for 2 or 3 months, and then they had a foot in the door, they did great work, and they got a full-time job with us. And so I think, you know, when I ended up making my decision between the 3 jobs, you know, I did my research and I looked at the potential, and therefore I stood out. So when I was interviewed, you know, even though it was a position that, you know, was lower pay than the other 2 I was looking at the time, I was able to talk about when they said, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I talked about a different division within the same company and a different position. And they loved that. They loved that I was forward thinking, you know, that I had spent time on their website, you know, particularly nowadays where this is what we're doing. We're all virtual. We're all online all the time. You know, if you're in the interview process, you should be able to talk about, you know, details that you're learning from that company's website. And really being, you know, honest and with your current employer. You know, in my case, I was able to say, you know, I'm pursuing my graduate degree in criminal justice. You know, I'm showing up here every day. I'm working very hard. And, you know, at the same time, eventually I will leave for a job in criminal justice. And I was very honest about that. And I did a great job with my work. And then, you know, I was able to connect, you know, through a professor, luckily, to pursue other opportunities. So I think just, you know, being honest if you're in a position that isn't related, but at the same time, doing a great job, thinking about what skills, you know, to the points made earlier, what power skills can transfer to other positions, and also be willing to start maybe, you know, a level below where you might think you are, be willing to start as an intern if, you know, if there's a lot of possibilities that you see. And if you do that, you know, look to other people at the company as mentors, and keep doing that online networking while you're at it as well.
That's great. Yeah, I think that shows a ton of drive, right? I think that's the key thing that you showed to your employer when you took that first entry-level job that may not have been your dream job, that you had the drive to show that you wanted to move onward and upward, and that was obviously appreciated and recognized over time. I got a couple questions here from the audience for our panelists, and I just want to make a note. The panelists are going to try and answer the best they can. Answers are going to be based on experiences as job seekers, and some of the folks here have experience as hiring managers. They're not career counselors, but I'm sure that the answers and their experiences are going to be helpful just as a guide to everybody. One question that came through on whether or not someone should go to grad school during an economic crisis. And funny enough, all 3 of our panelists tonight, in fact, did go on to further education. As Gabriella just mentioned, she got her master's. Hind went to law school, and Steve got his MBA. It'd be great if each of you can share just kind of for a brief moment your experience on furthering your own education during a crisis or slightly after a crisis, whether it's law school or a master's level program. And let's start with Hind, if that's okay.
Definitely. I was actually asked this question earlier this week by a Suffolk sophomore, and I told him that it was kind of situational. For me, I had to defer because I thought that I was going to take on more loans at the time, and I had to kind of defer and wait a little bit, and I couldn't at the time take on that, you know, that financial capacity and go straight to law school because my family had moved and I didn't have, you know, the finances to take out loans for housing and whatnot. But in hindsight, looking back, as the market got better during the '08 recession, student loan interests increased. And if I went straight to law school, my loans would have maybe gotten lower when the market was at its lowest. But then again, I wouldn't have landed my position that I stayed in for 10 years and increased my professional development at Sentinel if I'd stayed in Boston. So I think you really have to look at your situation. What happened was I worked out a plan with my employer and went to law school while remaining employed with them. So I worked on my professional development, still went to law school, got a JD, which was a value add to them, and it all worked out for me. So I think if the goal for you is to pursue a degree, I think you should definitely pursue it. I think you should look at it holistically in terms of finances, in terms of whether that's a goal you want to reach. But for me, I had to defer for a little while.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. I think that's a key point, right? Is everyone's situation going to be a little bit different. There are some employers that are still out there that can help, right? So you said that you did go to law school while you were still working. So there are some employers that do have educational incentives, right? Because it is a benefit for the employer if you further your professional development too. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you are going for jobs is look for the potential benefits packages, right? If you get to a point where you're comparing two potential offers, if furthering education is a goal of yours, see if that's a potential opportunity for educational reimbursement. So that's great. Thanks for sharing that. Steve, do you want to add on to that? Anything your experience for the executive MBA?
Sure. Yeah. And I agree with him that it's very situational. I would say, number one, think about whether you need the income right now. If you do, either keep the job that you have or continue looking for a job. Basically, don't let the current situation prevent you from changing your plans aside from income, because income is number one. You need to take care of your family first. Mm-hmm. I think for me, I found immense value in working first out in a full-time job before going after my master's. It was actually 8 years between my bachelor's and starting my master's. 8 years of experience at 2 different companies, working in all types of different projects and situations. And the reason that benefited me is I had something to apply what I was learning in MBA classes directly back to the job that I was in. I was actually doing it while I was working. And I also built a great network of people that I'm still friends with today, that I could always give a call, if I do need assistance with a job, or, if a friend of mine does. And those connections are much deeper if you can relate to someone not only on a personal level, but also on a work level. So I had someone in my group, for example, who is exactly within my same industry, my same job family even. And if I were to be laid off in my current situation, I would pick up the phone and call him right away, because I know exactly what he works on, and that it's right up my alley. So again, for me, income comes first, but if you're okay there, I would say go for it. It really depends on your own situation.
That's great. Yeah, you threaded that networking in with the kind of post-secondary education piece too, right? So keeping in touch with people, not just undergrad, but if you do go to graduate school, right, you never know who can help your career in the future, or it can be kind of beneficial for you to kind of keep in touch with over time. So anything else you'd like to add on that, Gabriella?
Yeah, I think one thing that's really important, or was for me, was kind of really narrowing down what you want to do. And some people are able to do that through internships. Some people, might want to work full-time first to make sure that the graduate degree that you're pursuing, is the right graduate degree for you. So for example, my sophomore year, I did an internship that I found through the Career Development Center, and it was a paralegal position at a law office. And my sophomore year, I wasn't quite sure yet whether I wanted to pursue a master's or a law degree. And I completed that internship. It was a paid internship, so I made money. I built my resume, actually made a lifelong mentor with the attorney I worked with. We've traveled to Costa Rica and Peru and all over the world together. And I decided pretty quickly that I did not want to go to law school and I did not want to be an attorney. And then kept kind of discovering through other experiences that I did want to work in criminal justice and did want to work in policy and get my master's. So I was lucky in that, I didn't try to make a decision too quickly. I didn't, jump into law school and spend a lot of time and money and then realize, oh no, actually I don't need to do that. So for people that haven't had the benefit of internships yet, I'd recommend, looking at some entry-level positions and kind of figuring out, from those, if that's the field that you want to, continue pursuing, great way to still, build your resume and make those decisions while also, saving time and money, and making a lot of connections. So I definitely recommend that, as well as, in my case, I was able to work at Suffolk full-time and go to graduate school part-time. And because of that, I was able to kind of take my time and explore options. So if you are able to get grad school, at least somewhat paid for, even if you're doing something that doesn't necessarily align, then I think that's a good way to look at it too.
Yeah, that's great. And we actually had an add-on question that kind of came through, and I think you addressed it a little bit there, Gabriella, but MBA versus certification type programs, and I'll kind of speak from experience as part of the RAMP program. I've had a couple great mentees so far, and one of the questions I've been asked, a couple times now, especially being in the financial services world, is should I go right and get my CFA? Should I get my MBA? Should I get my CFP? And I think it really depends, kind of what you alluded to, Gabriella. Where's the ultimate outcome that you want to get to, right? I think that's a big piece of it. And if you're not sure yet, maybe you should wait a little bit before you kind of make that commitment, both financially and time-wise, to decide you want your MBA or JD or certificate program. And it doesn't hurt to try and get a little bit of years of experience, whether it's internship or entry-level job, before you ultimately make that decision for yourself. Another question from the audience. This one's for Steve. Steve, how has this change to a work-from-home environment impacted your job?
So my job involves travel every single week. So I've been about 2 years with the company that I'm with right now, and it's been 2 years of nonstop travel, and now I'm down to 0% travel. So it's definitely been a change for me personally to get adjusted to not being on the road all the time. But it's actually been nice, to be able to focus a little bit on home life. I work for a Chicago company, so we don't actually have a Boston office. So there's really no clear path for me to get back into the Chicago office on a regular basis right now. So yes, I'm 100% remote. And, it's certainly hard to lose the benefit of not being able to be in the same room as colleagues and clients, but we're certainly adapting. Right now I work in mergers and acquisitions, and the activity from our clients have slowed, but it's definitely still happening. We're actually starting to onboard new clients right now without even meeting them in person. I consider myself pretty lucky to work at a company that is fairly young. We just hit 18 years, but we learned a lot of lessons during the 2008 and 2007 crisis, which has certainly helped us prepare for where we are today. I suggest, looking for companies that have adapted well, companies that aren't just, trying to find ways to get their offices open, but are actually changing the way that they do business, because that will help them succeed in the long term. We really just don't know how long the current situation will go on for. So adaptation, I think, is pretty critical.
Yeah, you've definitely seen some of the largest companies. What we're experiencing at Merrill too is just the forced digitization of things. I mean, it seems like it's certainly accelerated from a timeline perspective. You saw the CEO of Microsoft allude to that. You're seeing changes in digital adaptation that would take 2 to 5 years happen in 2 to 3 weeks, right? And I think you're going to continue to see that trend. So that's great insight. Thank you. Hind, a question for you. What do you feel is the respectful cadence for job applicants to follow up on a position that they've either applied for or perhaps that they've interviewed for already?
Okay. Well, I would definitely defer to the experts here at Suffolk, I would say. But what's worked in the past for me, and also what's worked for analysts that try to reach out to me in my past position as director at Sentinel, I would say is if you've already interviewed and or you're planning on interviewing, definitely send a thank you note. And you want to tailor that thank you note within the first 24 hours. Make sure you send it out. If you don't send a thank you note, it's not too late. Send an I'm still interested email, and if you don't get a response or have a response that with a no update response, definitely send them a follow-up email that says you're still interested. And when would be an appropriate time for me to check back in? If you don't receive a response, like I said, just give them some time, because these people are really bombarded right now. It's been, in the past, it's been a few days when you receive a response. It might be a few weeks. So give them, just give them some patience, have some patience. Just drop a line that says, make sure you saw, just want to make sure you saw my last email. I'm following up again. Blank job title. Please let me know when you get a chance, about this job position. Thank you. Have patience, and just follow up. I would say follow up, and follow up. That's really it about the sequence of events here.
That's great. Yeah, I think pleasantly persistent, right, is the kind of the key there, right? And show that you're human, right? Don't follow up just about you, and say, hey, how's my job application? How am I doing? Say, acknowledge what the kind of the reality that we're all in right now, right? And be human and show that softer side to the soft skills.
Well, I hope you're healthy and safe, and just be persistent, but also be human. Definitely agree there.
That's great. Gabriella, question for you. Did you lean into your network at all for your first job, such as family or professors or friends? And if so, how did you do it?
Yeah, I'd say the two groups that were key for me was professors as well as the Career Development Center. So my professors I had a mix of kind of full-time professors as well as adjunct professors. And what I did was I excelled in my courses, and then I reached out to them around the time that I was job searching and said, hi, I'm interested in this type of position. I'm graduating soon. With one professor, I wasn't exactly interested in his agency, but I knew that he had a lot of great connections. So I asked if he could give me names and email addresses of 3 people that he thought that I should speak to. And then I contacted all of them and had coffee with all of them, or, Zoom in this case. And one of them, did lead to an interview. And then there was another professor whose agency I was very interested in, which happens to be Community Resources for Justice, where I now work 10 and a half years later. And so when I was graduating, I knew of CRJ from her as a professor, as well as from Suffolk's Career Development Center and the job fairs that Suffolk hosted. And so I was able to email her and say, I saw this position, really interested in it. I was one of your students. It was a year or a year and a half before. So it's not like I had, just immediately been in her class. I let her know I was applying for it, and she wrote back and said, I'm not involved with the hiring for that, but I'll send an email to the person who is, and I'll let her know that you were a great student. And, the next day I had an interview lined up for that. So I think definitely, being able to tap into your professors, ask them to, tell them a little bit about what you're interested in, ask them to recommend some people for you to speak with. And certainly if you have adjunct professors that are working in the field, check out their agency websites and see if they have things that you're interested in. And then kind of to dovetail on the graduate school question, as you're looking into things you're interested in, pay attention to what their requirements were. That was something when I was job searching, I was realizing that a lot of the things at least I wanted to do in the long term did say, master's degree preferred. And so that was something that I decided to pursue. But if you're looking at jobs that you're really interested in, even in the future, and they say, bachelor's degree required plus 5 years experience, then, maybe you want to get the experience instead of the master's degree. So that's kind of something to pay attention to as well. But I definitely recommend utilizing your professors, utilizing, the job postings from the Career Development Center, making sure that your resume is in tip-top shape, because we're getting a lot of resumes, even in times when it's low unemployment, when times unemployment's high, you really have to stand out from the crowd. And if I see a resume with mistakes on it, that shows me you don't have great attention to detail. But if I see a nice resume and I get a follow-up email, then I'm paying closer attention to that.
No, it's a great point, and I think I've referenced this in the past when we've had conversations. But there's a great example of a resume. Marissa Mayer was the former CEO of Yahoo. Now, I wouldn't do this for every interview that you apply for. Steve, I think probably have seen this too. But she had one of the best resumes I've ever seen. And obviously, not everyone here is a CEO, but you can certainly tailor it to you. And it just made it a little bit more personal, but kept it professional. So I'd recommend everyone that's on here tonight, just Google Marissa Mayer resume, and I think it's a good way to kind of stand out from the crowd, because I think we've all seen resumes that are pretty boilerplate. Mistakes are a big one that you want to watch out for, but if you can find little ways to make yourself stand out in a professional way as well, I also suggest trying to find ways to do that. We did have a question come through, Steve. So one of the questions is, someone graduated just recently now, and they're not entirely sure if they want to spend their career in what they graduated in. So before getting their master's, should they be thinking about looking for an opportunity, whether it's volunteer, internship, or entry level, to see if they really like that kind of career path?
I would say absolutely. I would say grab any experience you can, whether it's directly related or not, because one of two things can happen. Either you can learn whether that area is something that you're interested in, or maybe it's not something you're interested in. And it's also a great opportunity to network. You never know who that person knows, who that person is married to, who their friends are, their family. Any chance you can to make real world connections and to get real experience, I would say absolutely jump at it.
That's great. Yeah, I got another question as you were saying that too. It seems like it'd be a popular topic. Directed a little bit more towards me, but since I'm in the financial services sector, it was specifically to financial services. So question was, what should you suggest to improve upon beyond soft skills to pursue a position in the financial services sector? What I would say is similar to kind of what Gabriella alluded to earlier is, there's so many big financial firms here in Boston and obviously New York and wherever else you look in the country. There's a lot of entry-level positions. I went into an entry-level position at Putnam in my first job. That's not where I ended up, obviously. So I think that sometimes just trying to get your foot in the door with a financial services company, probably like most industries, can be key, right? You can work your way a lot easier upward in a company versus trying to get that first door open. So my first suggestion would be just to look for jobs inside financial services that you think would help open doors to broader opportunities in those same companies.
If I could add, Mark,
yeah,
I think the other thing is that don't pigeonhole yourself to a financial services company. At CRJ, we are a nonprofit. We have financial staff in our fiscal department, so think broadly. We have IT staff at CRJ. We have human resources staff. So don't just think about like, this is the industry I want, therefore I have to look for a financial company. If you're looking to get fiscal experience, accounts payable, accounts receivable, all those jobs are available at nonprofits. They're available at, other private companies and public companies and, within public service as well. I think this is a really good time to work in both public services and social services because there's a lot of needs that are coming out of this. And I think, thinking broadly about, where can I learn these skills, apply these skills, and then have a financial services job on my resume when the Big Four are hiring again, you're going to be, and higher ranked than somebody that did another type of position. So think more broadly about the type of agencies and organizations that you could work for that still might align with your major and still would give you skills in that area.
That's great. And getting the experience is key, right? That's the big takeaway from there. So last question I'm going to direct to Hind. So Hind, it's kind of expanding upon what we alluded to earlier. Do you have any advice for someone who wants to reach out and network with others from a career aspect? So I'm guessing probably made through LinkedIn right now, but also come across as genuine and cognizant of the environment that we're in now, not to come off as too self-serving.
Let's see. Not too self-serving. Just be genuine. I would say try to, if it's an ideal role or if it's an ideal company, I would try to go through something that try to research the company or the role and try to go through your memory bank and see if it's if you can kind of find an example where you can apply your skill or a requirement within that job description, and then tailor that note or tailor that email that you're going to send to that person or that company. And you're going to find out that you're basically writing down a narrative of their ideal candidate or their unicorn that they're looking for. And that's really, that's kind of how you're not going to be self-serving in that sense. And that's also basically that's how you're going to tailor your resume and tailor your LinkedIn and your objective and your cover letters, because when you start applying your examples and your skills and your skill set and the job description, that's framing that role. You're framing your background to that role, and I think that's the key.
That's great. Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head there, right? I think that one of the things that is good for all of us to take away here is when you're applying for jobs, make sure that your resume is tailored to the job that you're applying to, right? You might have multiple different versions of the same resume, but I wouldn't blindly submit the same version of one resume to 6 different positions. I would make sure you really read the job descriptions that are being posted before you submit that resume, so it doesn't look like you're just sending the same resume over and over and over again, right? That you put some thought into it.
Just to add, make
Please.
sure you reread every note that you send on LinkedIn, because you don't want to copy paste all the notes that you send. You might be sending 1,000 notes to 1,000 people, to, you know, the same recruiters, or people share things. So you don't want to make sure you're sending the same notes. So that's another tip.
The great word of caution. So a lot of great advice. Thanks everyone so far. I'm just going to turn this next portion of the program over to Joanna Lazarick from the Center for Career Development. Joanna, if you have a few moments just to share us some of the resources that are available to students and to alumni in the broader community, just during this time of uncertainty, and, you know, even after things get back to whatever the new normal is.
Mm-hmm. Yep, great, absolutely. Thank you, Mark, and thank you to all the panelists. You guys have really shared some amazing, amazing advice. Actually, I really couldn't have done better. So one thing that I want to reassure everybody about is, although this is a challenging time to search for a job right now, employers are still hiring. They may be hiring in different industries than you might have been considering before. They might be hiring in different roles. You just have to be flexible and you have to be open. A lot of employers are moving their work to virtual. I do know people who have interviewed and gone through the process and are getting jobs, and they're starting virtually. So that is, you know, that is happening. I just want to also remind Suffolk University alumni that you may not know this, but you have access to the Career Development Center's services at any time after you graduate. As long as you did a full-time program and you graduated, you can check in with us, you can make appointments with us, you can join our online career platform at any time and take advantage of that. So what I wanted to, and also to remind you all that, and the panelists have touched on this, that this is a great time to reassess your career goals, to make sure that your resume and LinkedIn are looking their absolute best, that they're updated, to explore different career directions, and absolutely to network. This is a great time to set up those virtual meetings. So I'm going to just, if you don't mind, share my screen.
Please.
It'll take a second. And this is just a real quick rundown of the basic services that we provide to alumni and students. So the first is, and I feel a little funny calling these in-person resources, but basically what I mean are these sort of live services that we offer that you can access virtually. And one of the most important is one-on-one appointments. I think a lot of folks feel most reassured when they can speak to somebody one-on-one, especially when things are really challenging. And there are a number of ways that you can schedule appointments with the Career Development Center. It's important to remember that these are typically half-hour appointments. So if you feel like you have a lot of things that you want to cover, I recommend maybe starting with 2 back-to-back half-hour appointments. And you can schedule these on the online platform that I mentioned, Handshake. I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. You can just email careers@suffolk.edu, or you can call our main number, which you can see here on the screen. I also want to reiterate that even though I have the word alumni in my title, I'm the Associate Director of Internships and Alumni Career Engagement, all of our 5 advisors can help you. So don't feel that you just have to come to me. You can talk to Laura Marchant, to Lauren Gray, to Christelle Paul, to Carolyn Ray. Gabriella can actually tell you. Laura is a phenomenal resource at the Career Development Center. She worked with Gabriella. She knows her well, so she's very, very helpful. You also have access to a lot of our career events and programs. So whether we have posted events in Handshake or whether, you know, they're through other departments, Suffolk has career events that are available to alumni as well as current students. We also have quite a lot of online resources that are on the Career Development Center website. And you have the link right there. I'll also post it in chat afterwards so that you can just go right to it. One of the most important resources that you have at your fingertips is Handshake. It's an online career portal. Anyone who has been involved, has been a student at Suffolk within the past 3 or 4 years, may have had experience with it. For those of you who haven't, you will have to set up a new account with it, but that's fine. You just do a password, use your Suffolk email. It works a lot like LinkedIn, but it's an online job board. You create a profile, you post application materials, and you can search for jobs and internships and apply to them. It doesn't have as many employers as something like Indeed or LinkedIn, but they're more focused. These are employers who are specifically going to universities and are interested in university students, recent grads, and alumni. It's also, a lot of the employers are specifically looking for Suffolk students and grads. So I just approved a company today that a Suffolk alumni was looking to hire for. So they're familiar with Suffolk. You can access career events. There are all sorts of events that the Career Development Center and other Suffolk partners have posted on Handshake, and employers also post their own events. So we see some amazing virtual programming come in from companies like City Year and the Peace Corps and McKinsey and, you name it, all sorts of different organizations, charter schools, and they're all posting virtual events. So I'm going to stop sharing, but then I just want to very quickly share again and show you the Career Development Center website. As you can see, we feature some of the areas that we really want you to pay attention to now, like researches for the job search on COVID-19. We keep this as updated as we can. We've put as much material on here as we can so that you have these resources. Just to click on that really quickly, you can see that we have all sorts of information. There's even a webinar. It's a Suffolk webinar that features Suffolk alumni speaking about very similar issues. So if you want even more reassurance from Suffolk alumni, I really recommend listening to this webinar. It was really good. And all sorts of resources and strategies that you can look at. And there's a lot on here. So all sorts of information about when to follow up, how, successful video or successful strategies. So make sure you do go to the Suffolk University website and look at the career services resources, because there's a lot up there. So that's about it for the basics. Are there any questions?
That's great, Joanna. Thank you. I saw there was one question that came through specific to international students, and I saw a little tab that was on the Career Services website that's pertaining specifically to resources for international students. So I'd point that individual in the direction of the Career Services team and the website there, and hopefully you can have some of your questions answered there. One question did come through surrounding whether or not everyone should use the services of a recruiter. Would you mind just sharing any input that you have on that?
Yeah, absolutely. What I would say is that, yes, absolutely, explore using a recruiter, because a lot of people get jobs through recruiters. However, what I would say with using a recruiter is don't let that be your only source of getting a job. It doesn't mean, if you're working with a recruiter, that doesn't mean that you can neglect networking, applying for jobs, all of those things. You really need to keep up the rest of your job search in addition to working with a recruiter, because a recruiter, they're going to have different connections, but you may also be really surprised at the connections that you can find through your Suffolk network and through your friends and family and faculty networks. So keep up the networking, keep up the applying. I do want to make a quick note about very creative resumes. They look fantastic, but the vast majority of resumes that you are, in fact, pretty much all the resumes that you're going to be submitting nowadays go through a scanner, and photos and those funky colored bars and things like that are not, the scanner will not see those, they will not read those, so that information will be lost. So I really recommend talking to somebody about your resume who can help you to basically beat the system and make sure, basically what you're looking at, you need a very traditional style resume. Now, creative resumes can come into play if you go to an interview and you want to hand someone something that really looks phenomenal. Or you're in a creative industry and you might post a creative version of your resume on your LinkedIn, but then you're submitting a more traditional style.
Great suggestion. Technology has certainly changed. Thank you for that, Joanna.
Yep.
And obviously, thanks again for representing the Career Development Center here tonight. I know you guys are a fantastic resource both for graduating students and alumni, no matter when they graduated. So thank you again for your helpful tips and kind of suggestions in terms of where we can find some more info. We're getting to the end of our time here tonight, so I'm going to turn it back to each of the panelists individually for just some last words. I think during these uncertain times, it'd be great if everyone could just share one piece of advice you'd give to anyone that's currently searching for a job, either thinking of going back to school or even just looking kind of for tips for success. We'll start with Hind, then we'll go to Steve, and then we'll end with Gabriella.
Sure. So as part of Suffolk University's Summa Society and Black Alumni Network, I know I have a great support system right now if I ever needed it. And that's because I took the initiative to really get involved and get connected. It was very easy to create a network with the university. And if there's one tip I would give my old self, it's to start here. So if you don't know how to navigate the process, there are a lot of people that can help you, dedicated to your success and really dedicated to your happiness. So we're really, truly all in this together. Don't be afraid to drop me a message, drop any of the panelists a message, drop any of us a message. So in terms of your network, this is your first network that's right here. So that's the first tip I would give you.
Thanks, Hind. Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sure. With the huge increase in video conferencing and the lack of face-to-face communication, the personal connection that you do get with video is as important as ever. So at every opportunity you can, instead of an email or even instead of a phone call, try to make it a video chat. So as you're going through, a job search, if you are looking for a job today, instead of, reaching out to someone on LinkedIn, offer to, take a break during lunch or to grab a coffee together. Just try to be a little bit more different and try to get out of the tech space. Having face-to-face conversations like this are the absolute best way to build rapport with people, build trust, and you never know what kind of doors those will open.
That's great. Gabriella?
Yeah, I'd say in preparing for the interview process, a lot of people, prepare their greatest strengths and, a weakness that's really a strength and things like that. And one of the things that I learned a lot from the Career Development Center was to be prepared to answer behavioral type questions. So for example, right before this, I was interviewing somebody on Zoom and I asked him to tell me about a crisis situation that he's been in before and how he's handled it. And actually looking back to one of the positions I was really interested in that I felt like I did terribly in the interview was the person that was hiring, who then became a secretary of a division for Massachusetts. So a pretty powerful person asked me, if you were to start tomorrow, what is the first thing that you would do? And just being able to think ahead with those types of questions. And of course, I think you have to follow all the advice we've given so far to have the opportunity to interview, right? But then don't stop there. Don't say, oh, okay, I have the interview. I'm going to practice my greatest skills and I'll have this, down. A lot of us ask behavioral type questions and situational type questions. And so try to anticipate those. And even if you don't get them, to say, what one of your strengths are. If you just tell me, I'm great, I'm very organized. Okay, give me an example of how you're very organized. So even if you're not asked those behavioral situational questions, if you prepare for them, you can give an answer that's much more specific and much more, worthwhile to that hiring manager to hear and to consider, and actually place you in one of their positions and not just think, okay, you're rattling off, some skills that you were able to Google, but can actually think about how you can put that into place in working with them. I think that's really huge. And of course, getting the interview is tough. As I mentioned, I had 55 jobs I was interested in, 36 that I applied for, and only 5 of them did I get interviews for. And so it is a bit of a numbers game. But the more you reach out and the more you do everything else we're suggesting kind of in between and on the side and in addition, the more success you'll have at getting, yourself on the phone or in front of someone on video, and then being prepared for, what might be tough questions if you weren't prepared, but, you can easily answer if you're thinking about those types of questions ahead of time.
That's great. Great advice from everyone tonight. I appreciate everyone's time. Hind, Steve, Gabriella, Joanna, thank you again. Thank you to Amy and Jonathan and Caitlin in the Alumni Relations Office that helped put this together for us too. And thank you for everyone that joined us here tonight. We know your time is precious, especially when things are this uncertain. You can spend time with your family. We really appreciate you joining us here tonight. Congratulations to all the seniors again who achieved an awesome milestone. We continue to root for you. We're excited to have you as part of our Alumni Association and community going forward. And with that, I'm going to wish everyone a great night and stay safe. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.